My friends, I want to speak to you today about a truth that is often forgotten in the noise of this world. There are things God has placed within you, sacred things, holy things, that are not meant for the ears of everyone. If you are chosen by God, if you walk in His light, there are things you must hold close, things you must never reveal. The world does not understand the ways of God. It mocks what it cannot comprehend. When Joseph shared his dream with his brothers, they hated him for it. When Samson revealed the secret of his strength, he lost the anointing that set him apart. Some things are meant to be guarded, for the enemy prowls like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. There are trials God has brought you through that no one else would understand. You have wrestled with the darkness. You have fought battles in the secret place. And the Lord has given you victories that only He and you know about. Not every struggle needs to be shared, because some will not encourage you. They will use it against you. The desires God has placed in your heart, the calling He has spoken over your life, these are treasures too precious to be cast before those who do not believe. There are those who will not celebrate your purpose, but instead try to hinder it. Not everyone can handle the weight of your vision, and not everyone should be trusted with what God is doing in your life. There are wounds, deep wounds, that you have carried, and that God alone has healed. Some people will not see the hand of God in your healing. They will only see the scars. They will remind you of your pain instead of rejoicing in your restoration. Do not allow the enemy to use your past against you by placing it in the wrong hands. And then, my friends, there is the most sacred of all, your time with the Lord, that place where He speaks to you, where He strengthens you, where He reveals His mysteries to your soul. There are things spoken in the quiet place, in the stillness of His presence, that are meant for your spirit alone. Guard these moments. Treasure them. Do not let the world trample upon what is holy. If God has called you, if His hand is upon you, then be wise, be discerning, know what to share and what to keep hidden. For the enemy does not need to steal what you have. Sometimes he only needs you to give it away. But if you trust in the Lord, if you walk in wisdom, nothing and no one can take from you what God has ordained. God bless you. There are moments in life when God speaks to His chosen ones, revealing things that are beyond human understanding. He places dreams, visions, and divine assignments in the hearts of those He has set apart. But not everything God reveals is meant to be shared with everyone. Some things must be kept sacred, hidden within the depths of your heart, because the enemy is always looking for a way to disrupt what God has planned for you. The Bible is filled with examples of people who received divine revelations, yet not all of them handled them wisely. Think about Joseph. God gave him dreams of greatness, of ruling over nations, of being placed in a position of authority. In his youthful enthusiasm, he shared these visions with his brothers, expecting them to rejoice with him. But instead of celebrating, they despised him. Jealousy took root, and his own family turned against him. They betrayed him, sold him into slavery, and for years he suffered because he revealed something that should have been guarded. Eventually, God fulfilled His promise in Joseph's life, but his journey might have been different if he had understood that not every revelation should be shared too soon. The enemy is not all-knowing, but he is always listening. He watches, he studies, and he looks for ways to interfere with the plans of God's people. When you speak too soon about what God has revealed to you, you may be giving the enemy a strategy to attack your purpose. Some doors close not because God didn't want them open, but because they were spoken about too soon, and the enemy used people, circumstances, or even your own doubt to delay what God intended for you. There are people who will not understand what God has placed in your heart. They will question, criticize, and even mock what they cannot comprehend. When Nehemiah set out to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, he did not broadcast his plans to everyone. He inspected the ruins in secret, seeking wisdom from God before revealing his purpose. He knew there were enemies, Sanballat and Tobiah, who would try to stop him. And as expected, when his mission became known, opposition arose. If Nehemiah had revealed everything too soon, the enemy's attacks could have been even greater. But because he used wisdom, God's plan prevailed, and the walls were rebuilt. In today's world, where everything is public, where people feel the need to share every detail of their lives, it has become even more important to walk in discernment. Not every dream, not every goal, not every blessing needs to be announced. Some things need to be nurtured in private before they can be revealed in public. Just as a seed is planted in the darkness of the soil before it breaks through the ground, there are divine revelations that must remain hidden until the right time. God may have given you a vision for your future, a ministry, a calling, or an assignment that is bigger than anything you could imagine. But if you share it with the wrong people, they may plant seeds of doubt, discouragement, or jealousy. They may try to talk you out of it, not because they mean harm, but because they cannot see what God has shown you. Sometimes the greatest opposition comes not from strangers, but from those closest to you. Jesus himself experienced this when he returned to his hometown. The people who had known him as a child could not accept that he was the Messiah. Because of their unbelief, he could not perform many miracles there. This is why it is so important to protect what God has given you. Pray for discernment. Ask God to show you who is truly for you and who might be an obstacle to your calling. Not everyone who smiles at you is meant to walk with you. Not everyone who listens to your words is meant to know your heart. Even Jesus had an inner circle, Peter, James, and John, whom he revealed deeper truths to. There were things he shared with the crowds, but there were greater things he only shared with those who were spiritually ready to receive them. Waiting for the right time to reveal what God has shown you is not a sign of fear. It is a sign of wisdom. Jesus himself often told people not to speak of the miracles he performed because he understood the timing of God's plan. There is a season for everything. And speaking too soon can bring unnecessary opposition, confusion, or delay. God's revelations to you are precious. They are a part of your journey, your destiny, and your calling. Hold them close. Nurture them in prayer. And when the time is right, God will make them known in a way that no one can stop. Until then, trust him. Walk in wisdom and guard what he has placed within you. Life is filled with struggles, trials, and battles that shape who we are. Every person walking with God has gone through seasons of difficulty, times of pain, disappointment, and hardship. But not every struggle is meant to be shared with everyone. There are battles God has brought you through that should remain between you and him, because not everyone will understand, and not everyone will encourage you. Some will use your struggles against you, turning what was meant to strengthen your faith into something that weakens your resolve. There is a danger in exposing your wounds to the wrong people. The world is not always kind to those who have struggled. Some people see vulnerability as weakness, and instead of offering comfort, they pass judgment. They look at where you have been and refuse to see where God is taking you. They define you by your past rather than by the transformation God has worked in your life. This is why discernment is so important. It is not about hiding the truth, but about protecting what God has done in you. God places dreams and desires in the hearts of his chosen ones. These are not ordinary thoughts or fleeting wishes. They are divine assignments, visions of what he has planned for your life. But just as God has a purpose for you, the enemy has a strategy to stop you. That is why it is so important to protect what God has placed inside you. Not everyone will understand your dreams, and not everyone will celebrate them. Some will try to discourage you. Some will speak words of doubt, and others may even attempt to sabotage what God has planned. The story of Joseph is a powerful example of why we must be careful with the dreams God gives us. When Joseph received his visions from God, he was filled with excitement. He believed his brothers would be happy to hear about his future greatness. But instead of celebrating, they resented him. Jealousy took root in their hearts, and what started as simple envy turned into betrayal. They threw him into a pit, sold him into slavery, and tried to erase his future. What they did not know was that the very dream they tried to kill was the one God would use to save them all. Many people lose their dreams not because they lack the ability to achieve them, but because they share them with the wrong people. There are those who, instead of encouraging you, will try to plant seeds of doubt. They will tell you it is impossible, that you are not qualified, that you do not have what it takes. They may not say it out of malice, but even well-meaning people can speak words that weaken your faith. If you are not careful, you may start to believe them. You may begin to second-guess what God has spoken to your heart. The enemy knows that if he can get you to doubt, he can delay or even destroy your destiny. He will use people, circumstances, and even your own fears to try to steal what God has given you. That is why some dreams must be guarded. When Nehemiah set out to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, he did not announce his plans to everyone. He inspected the ruins quietly, prayed for wisdom, and revealed his mission only when the time was right. He knew that opposition would come, and when it did, he was prepared. He faced mockery, threats, and even attempts to stop the work, but because he had sought God's guidance, he was able to complete what he had set out to do. Your dreams require the same level of protection. There will be those who do not believe in you. There will be those who try to distract you, who try to pull you away from your calling. Some will speak negativity over your life, hoping to keep you from rising to what God has called you to be. But their words do not define you. God's word does. The only way their doubts can stop you is if you accept them. That is why you must guard your heart and be selective about who you allow to speak into your life. Jesus himself understood the importance of guarding his mission. He did not reveal everything to everyone. There were things he shared with the crowds, but there were deeper truths he only revealed to his disciples. Even among them, he had an inner circle, Peter, James, and John, who were allowed to see greater revelations. This was not favoritism, it was wisdom. Not everyone is ready to handle the weight of your calling. Not everyone is meant to walk with you into the future God has planned. There is a time to share your dreams, but there is also a time to keep them between you and God. Some things need to grow in the secret place before they can be revealed to the world. Just as a seed must be buried in the soil before it becomes a tree, your dreams must be nurtured in prayer, strengthened by faith, and protected from anything that could hinder their growth. If God has placed a dream in your heart, trust that he will bring it to pass. Do not let fear, doubt, or the words of others steal what he has given you. Move forward with wisdom. Surround yourself with people who will encourage you, who will pray for you, who will help you walk in faith. And most importantly, keep your eyes on the one who gave you the dream in the first place. He is faithful, and in his perfect time, he will bring everything to completion. Healing is a deeply personal journey, one that is often misunderstood by those who have not walked the same path. When God brings healing, whether it be physical, emotional, or spiritual, it is a sacred work, something that should be cherished and protected. But too often, people feel the need to announce their healing before it has fully taken root. They share their testimony with the wrong audience. And instead of encouragement, they receive skepticism, doubt, or even mockery. Not everyone will celebrate your healing, and not everyone should be trusted with the details of what God has restored in your life. When Jesus healed people, he often told them not to speak about it. After healing a blind man, he instructed him to go home and not tell anyone. After raising Jairus' daughter from the dead, he gave strict orders that no one should know about it. This was not because Jesus was ashamed of his miracles, but because he understood the power of timing and discretion. He knew that not everyone had pure motives, and some would try to twist what God had done. There is wisdom in keeping certain things between you and God until the time is right. Healing is not just about the moment of deliverance. It is a process. When a wound is healing, it is still vulnerable. Exposing it too soon can cause it to reopen. The same is true for spiritual and emotional healing. When God delivers you from something, whether it be an addiction, a toxic relationship, a season of depression, or a deep betrayal, it is important to guard that healing. If you share it prematurely with people who do not understand, they may speak words that plant seeds of doubt, causing you to question whether you are truly healed. They may remind you of your past, trying to pull you back into an identity that God has already freed you from. The enemy loves to attack what God has restored. He will use people to bring up old wounds, to test your healing, to tempt you back into what you have been delivered from. This is why it is essential to protect your testimony in its early stages. When Jesus was in the wilderness after his baptism, the enemy came to test him. He had just been affirmed by God, declared as his beloved son, but the devil immediately tried to make him doubt that identity. In the same way, when you receive healing, the enemy will try to convince you that nothing has changed. He will whisper lies, trying to make you believe that your healing was only temporary, or that you are still bound to your past struggles. People who have not experienced what you have will not always understand the depth of your healing. Some may minimize it, saying that it wasn't really that bad. Others may remind you of how long you were broken, making it seem as if your healing is not real. But their opinions do not define the work that God has done in you. Healing is not for public approval. It is for your restoration. God does not need validation from others to confirm what He has already completed in your life. Some testimonies are meant to be shared in the right season with the right people. But there is a difference between sharing to glorify God and sharing for the approval of others. If your heart is seeking validation from people, you may be setting yourself up for disappointment. But when your healing is rooted in God alone, no amount of doubt from others can shake it. There is a time to testify, but there is also a time to remain silent and let your life be the proof of God's work. When God heals you, He often calls you to a new way of living. Some people may not understand why you no longer engage in certain conversations, go to certain places, or entertain certain relationships. They may see the change in you and try to pull you back into your old ways. This is why Jesus told the man at the pool of Bethesda, "Go and sin no more." Healing is not just about being free from pain. It is about walking in the new life that God has given you. If you surround yourself with people who do not honor your healing, you risk being drawn back into the very thing that once held you captive. God's healing is a gift, a demonstration of His love and power in your life. But just as a treasure is kept safe, so should the work He has done in you be guarded. Not everyone deserves access to the most intimate parts of your journey. Some things are meant to be kept between you and God until He leads you to share them. When the time is right, your testimony will speak for itself, and no one will be able to deny what the Lord has done. Until then, hold your healing close, protect it with wisdom, and walk forward in the freedom God has given you. Time spent with God is the most precious thing a person can have. In a world full of distractions, responsibilities, and noise, it is easy to let that sacred time slip away. But those who truly understand the value of being in God's presence know that it is something to be cherished, protected, and prioritized above everything else. Nothing compares to the moments when the heart is fully surrendered, when the soul is quiet before Him, and when His voice speaks in ways that the world cannot comprehend. Throughout the Bible, we see that the men and women who walked closely with God were those who made time for Him. Moses would leave the camp and go up the mountain to meet with God, spending days in His presence, coming back with his face glowing from the encounter. David, despite being a king, wrote countless psalms expressing his deep desire to dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Jesus Himself would often withdraw to quiet places, away from the crowds and even His own disciples, to spend time alone with the Father. If the Son of God needed that time, how much more do we? But the world is always fighting for attention. There are always things to do, places to go, people to meet. The enemy knows that if he cannot destroy a person, he will distract them. He will fill their days with busyness, their minds with anxiety, and their hearts with everything except what truly matters. Time with God gets pushed aside, seen as something extra rather than essential. But when that happens, the soul begins to starve. A person may still go through the motions of faith, but without the presence of God, everything becomes dry and empty. There is power in stillness. In a culture that glorifies productivity, people forget that some of the greatest breakthroughs come not from striving, but from resting in God. When Elijah was running for his life, exhausted and discouraged, God did not speak to him through the wind, the earthquake, or the fire. He spoke in a still, small voice. That voice is often drowned out when life becomes too loud. God is always speaking, always drawing near, but if the heart is too occupied with other things, his voice can be missed. Jesus taught that prayer is not about public display, but about intimacy. He said to go into a room, shut the door, and pray in secret. That secret place is where strength is found, where battles are won, and where clarity is given. It is where God reveals things that cannot be learned anywhere else. Those who neglect that time may still have knowledge, may still say the right words, but they lack the depth that comes only from being with Him. There is a difference between knowing about God and truly knowing Him, and that difference is found in time spent alone with Him. Many people long to hear God's voice, to receive direction and guidance, yet they do not make space for Him. They want answers, but they do not sit still long enough to listen. They want peace, but they fill their time with everything except the presence of the one who gives it. But those who cherish their time with God find that He is never far. They begin to recognize His voice, to sense His leading, to experience His presence in ways that transform them from the inside out. Time with God is not a duty, it is a privilege. It is not a burden, it is a gift. The God of the universe desires fellowship with His children, not just in moments of crisis, but daily. Those who walk closely with Him are those who understand that nothing in this world is more valuable than being near to Him. Everything else fades, but what is built in His presence lasts forever.